About 2 weeks before the wedding, Cameron and I got into a huge argument. The reason? He wants to have a kid with his mentor's daughter, Flora. We're just doing IVF, it's not like there's anything going on. My mentor's really sick, and his biggest wish is for Flora to have someone to rely on in the future, he said casually. But I felt a chill go down my spine. Our wedding's in half a month, and you want to have a kid with another woman? Don't you think that's insane? As I watched Cameron storm out, I posted on social media. Getting married in half a month, anyone want to be a new groom? Most of the responses from friends were joking. Of course, everyone knew how crazy I was about Cameron, to the point I was losing myself. No one would believe I'd walk away right when Cameron and I were about to finally tie the knot. I chased after Cameron for 3 years, thinking the happy ending would be becoming his girlfriend, and then he proposed on my 27th birthday. I thought all my efforts were finally paying off. But then he blindsided me with this bombshell. He wants to have a kid with someone else. I'm not a very forgiving person. But being so in love and feeling so small, Cameron always assumed I'd be fine, even giving my fiancé away. I was zoning out on the couch when the phone ring jolted me back. It was Blake, someone I hadn't spoken with in years. Blake and I were pretty much childhood friends. I used to follow him around, and people would tease me, calling me Blake's little shadow. Blake was always distant, that leave me alone type, but I never felt that way with him. Even if he was a man of few words, he always listened to my ramblings patiently. After college entrance exams, he went to Harvard, and I ended up in New York. Then I met Cameron and fell hopelessly in love, chasing him around so much I hadn't been back to LA in years. So getting Blake's call was kind of out of the blue. Before I could say anything, Blake's cool voice came through. Is what you said true? What? It took me a moment to realize what Blake meant. I glanced at a lonely picture of Cameron and me on the wall. Yes. He chuckled, sounding genuinely happy. If you don't mind, how about considering me? The wind blew in through a barely closed balcony door, lifting the sheer curtains and covering the bird of paradise plant in the corner. Okay, what's your offer? Blake's a lawyer from a family of business people, so yeah, I was sure he had some ulterior motive. I'll send a prenuptial agreement tomorrow. Figures. Blake wouldn't make any deal without terms. Besides, Diana, I want you to change my name in your contacts to hubby. I looked at my phone, still showing Blake. Is he for real? What happened to him after all these years? Diana, this is your first step towards a new life. Blake seemed to understand more than me how my love life was a mess. He knew he was just an escape route from an unhealthy relationship. Anything else? I clenched my phone tighter. Diana, you know I want a real marriage. His voice was low and persuasive. He already seemed to know what I was going to ask. I need you to fulfill all the duties of a wife, including being the mother of my children. Even though my family's putting pressure on me, I don't want our marriage to be like a roommate situation with no feelings involved. I stood up, pulled the white curtain down from the bird of paradise, and watched the sunset. Blake, since we're getting married, I'm not playing pretend with you. Alright, I'll pick you up from New York tomorrow then. Give me 2 weeks. I need to sort everything out first. I hung up and changed Blake's name to hubby, just like he said. It was my first step to escaping a relationship going nowhere. Cameron didn't come back for days. In the past, I'd be endlessly calling him, asking where he was and when he'd be home. But now, I didn't care anymore. Obviously, I knew where he was. I gathered up our invites and took them back from friends. They were surprised. Even though Cameron didn't want a big wedding, I stubbornly sent out invites just for ceremony's sake. I stuffed the invites into my bag and looked at them sadly, not wanting to hide the truth from anyone. Yeah, the groom's changed, so the invites have to, too. When I said that, there weren't any gasps, only joking around from friends. Clearly, they didn't take me seriously. Makes sense. I loved Cameron so much, never caring about his indifference. If someone else did this, I'd have a hard time believing it too. But it's okay. I'll prove it to them with my actions that this time, I'm really moving on. I got all the invites back, and pretty soon, Cameron was home again. He's normally so put together, but his white shirt was wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, and he looked exhausted. I could see right away he was in bad shape. The moment he saw me, Cameron came right out with something that matched my own recent decision. Let's recall the wedding invitations. My teacher passed away, and I need to mourn for at least 6 months. I can't get married during that time. As he spoke, Cameron probably expected me to lose it or start an argument. The wedding was something I'd been pushing for. Plus, I knew my grandpa was eagerly waiting for me to get married, so I was anxious too. Maybe Cameron had his rebuttal ready, but I just stayed calm. Got it. Sorry for your loss. The memorial service is today. Will you come with me? My teacher wanted to meet you. I paused while washing a cup. Though I wasn't fond of Flora, her dad was a well-respected professor whom I'd met once. The term at peace with oneself seemed to fit him. Sometimes, I couldn't quite understand how such a gentle and well-mannered man could have a daughter like Flora. But the deceased should be honored, so I didn't mind bringing flowers. I dried my hands, grabbed a black coat from the closet, picked up my bag, and left with Cameron, who had finished getting ready. Cameron's teacher was indeed highly regarded. The memorial hall was packed. Flora and her mom were thanking people who came to pay their respects. When Flora saw Cameron, she let go of her mom, rushed over, and clung to his sleeve, sobbing loudly. In the end, her knees buckled, and she almost fell. Cameron moved quickly to hold her and comfort her. I'll stay with her. You can go on ahead. I nodded, walked to Lynn's portrait, paid my respects, and then approached the pale-faced elderly woman nearby. Sorry for your loss. She wiped her tears, then held my hand and nodded. You're Cameron's girlfriend, right? Thank you for coming. I heard you were about to get married. He's so considerate to propose mourning for his teacher for half a year. It's really tough on you. I listened quietly, a mix of emotions swirling inside, but I didn't comment. I didn't mention the messy situation between Cameron and her daughter, but it seemed she caught a hint of my feelings. She sighed deeply. We practically watched Cameron grow up. He respects his mentor dearly, which is why he made this choice. Please don't blame him. Her words came with a hint of pleading. Forcing a smile, I replied, I understand his decision. After all, the groom had changed, so there was no point in blaming him. Flora's mom nodded. Don't mind Flora. She sticks to Cameron, but I can tell he doesn't have feelings for her. He actually likes you. I was taken aback, looking at Flora's mom in disbelief. Likes me? I repeated her words, trying to find the truth in her eyes. Seeing my reaction, Flora's mom explained more urgently. I'm not lying, dear. We always thought he was too involved with his books to have someone he liked. But since you appeared, he keeps mentioning you. Whether it's bumping into you, the meals you make, or the silly things you do to chase him, although it sounds like he's irritated, we know it's just him being unaware of his own feelings. As I listened, my emotions were all over the place. Maybe hearing this before would have made me happy and content, but now it just felt ironic and absurd. If Cameron really loved me, why hadn't I ever felt his sincerity? If he loved me, why did he agree to have a child with another woman? I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. From the moment he agreed to have a child with Flora, things between us were doomed. Cameron was the last one to leave. I stood by the funeral home entrance. His black car stopped in front of me. I instinctively went for the passenger seat door, only to be stopped by the sight of Flora, tears streaming down her face, from the rolled-down window. Flora's mom was in the back seat, wearing a look of apology. I didn't say anything, but as I reached for the door, Flora interrupted. Cameron, take me to the cemetery to see my dad again, just you, me, and Mom. Flora's mom frowned. Flora. But Flora started crying loudly. Dad's gone, and I just want to be with people close to me. Can't I even do that? I'll come back for you. Cameron shut the door in front of me, drove off with them both without looking back. I should have been used to it. Flora always came first with Cameron. I waited for 2 hours. Just as the sun was setting, the friendly gatekeeper asked if I was waiting for someone, which made me realize Cameron wasn't coming. The funeral home was in a rural area, and getting a taxi wasn't easy. I finally sighed in resignation, leaving the funeral home as the sky unexpectedly opened with rain. No turning back now, I trudged on, soaked, until I finally flagged down a cab. When I got back to the apartment, I was already feeling kind of off balance. I quickly took a hot shower, dried my hair halfway, and crouched by the TV stand looking for fever meds. Then I collapsed onto the bed and wrapped myself up. I slept really restlessly, waking up at least a few times in the middle of the night. My dreams were bizarre, full of things I couldn't remember clearly when I woke up. I weakly swallowed some cold medicine just before Cameron came in, didn't even look at me, headed straight to the bedroom, and pushed a suitcase out after a moment. Flora's been down lately, I'm going to stay with her for a few days. Call me if you need anything. Then, before I could reply, he opened the door and left. He never sees me, otherwise, how could he ignore my pale face from the fever? I stayed home for 2 days, wrote my resignation, and went to the office on Friday morning. The supervisor gently asked if my salary wasn't enough. I shook my head, just said I had to go home. So you and your boyfriend will be long distance then, huh? I took the leave certificate from HR and shook my head. No, we're breaking up soon, I need to hurry back for a wedding. I walked out of the place I had worked at for 4 years, leaving HR staring in surprise. Seeing Flora in the living room surprised me. What's this? Cameron, seeing me with a box, was obviously surprised and blurted out. I stayed calm, came up with a reason on the fly, showing no hint of panic about being caught. Oh, the company moved, so I brought my stuff back first. Where'd they move to? Cameron's eyebrows knitted slightly. I was about to answer when Flora suddenly cut in. Diana, my dad passed recently, I've been really down, probably done some dumb things like suggesting you and I have a kid, but now I see how ridiculous that was. Anyway, there's really nothing between Cameron and me. Now that my dad's gone, I don't want a kid. Sorry, hope you don't take it to heart. She looked all forlorn, and if it weren't for the screenshot of her provocatively suggestive chat that I'd seen earlier, I'd probably have fallen for her act. But now, I couldn't be bothered to call out her tricks. I just nodded slightly and carried my box back to the room. As soon as I settled the stuff, my phone inconveniently rang, and the sound was coming from the living room. That's when I realized I'd left my phone out there. Just as I was about to go get it, the door swung open, and Cameron stood there with a dark expression, holding my phone, looking straight at me. Who's this husband on your phone? I snatched my phone from Cameron's hand casually. Oh, it's just my friend, a joke nickname. With that, I walked out to the balcony under his skeptical gaze. I wasn't sure why Blake was calling me right now. Hello? I heard the clinking of a cup from his end, and Blake's voice sounded a bit weary. Nothing much, just tired, wanted to hear your voice. Also wanted to ask if you've looked at the prenup? Honestly, Blake's prenup was so generous that a senior from law school asked if Blake had lost his mind by sending it to me. I took a closer look at the terms and found out that if in the future, I felt he wasn't fulfilling his husbandly duties, I'd get half his assets in a divorce. Things I couldn't get from Cameron, Blake seemed to be giving me bit by bit. It doesn't make sense, really, why would you want to give me half of everything? Blake chuckled softly, no reason, just want to give you the best thing I can think of. Suddenly, breaking up with Cameron didn't feel so hard. Once I'm back in LA, let's sign it. When I got back to the living room after the call, Cameron looked at me with furrowed brows. All done? I nodded and turned to head to the kitchen. Next time, don't call your friend husband. Not cool. I turned to look at him and started laughing, confused about what gave Cameron the right to criticize me. Clearly, what he and Flora had was worse than my silly nickname. Just as I was about to respond, Flora chimes in suddenly. Diana, Cameron, let me take you out for a meal to make up for disturbing you guys. The restaurant Flora chose was famous for its seafood. I had no clue what to do with all that seafood piled on the table. Flora looked at me innocently. Diana, aren't you eating? This is their signature dish. She's allergic to seafood. Cameron placed a scallop on Flora's plate, avoiding my gaze. I scoffed internally. He knew I was allergic and still catered to Flora. Oh my, sorry Diana, I didn't know you were allergic to seafood. What should we do now? The food's already here. Staring at Flora, I sneered inside, not bothering to answer her. Instead, I called the waiter and ordered some veggies and beef stew for myself. After dinner, Flora wanted to go to the movies, but I wasn't interested. I waved them off. You guys go, I have work at the office. And without looking back at Cameron calling I'll take you, I stepped into the elevator. Returning to the apartment, I found our wedding photos had arrived. Suddenly, it all seemed pointless. I tossed them into a box and started packing my things. Honestly, over the years, Cameron hadn't given me much. I couldn't even fill a box. I dumped that box and our wedding photos into the trash bins at the complex entrance. Come tomorrow, they'd all be cleared out by the garbage truck. On the way back, I saw a post by Flora with a 9-picture collage. One of them was Cameron's back as he played a claw machine. Flora said thanks to Cameron for spoiling her like a child. I chuckled and gave her a like on her social media post. She probably thought these tricks would still get to me. Too bad I've already moved on from Cameron. Barely putting down my phone, Blake's message came through with a flight confirmation. Diana, booked you a ticket for tomorrow at 2 p.m. back to LA. It's been 2 weeks. I'll pick you up at the airport. Cameron returned the next day, close to noon. I was in the study sorting my stuff, tossing the unneeded ones into the shredder. Cameron seemed guilty, which made him unusually nice to me. Diana, it's been hectic lately. Today I'll spend time with you. What do you want to eat? I'll cook for you. How about sweet and sour ribs and winter melon soup? Should I add some stir-fried veggies and tofu? He rolled up his sleeves, tied the apron, and headed to the kitchen. Cameron is actually a great cook, though he's been swamped with work these years. I've always handled the cooking. Over time, even I forgot how good he was at it, how caring he could be. This meal was nothing more than a farewell dinner for me, so I turned around and went into the bedroom to pack. When I returned with my suitcase, Cameron was setting the soup on the table. 3 dishes and a soup, he was quick. He seemed a bit shocked seeing my suitcase. Heading on a business trip? I didn't answer, just rolled up my sleeves and said, let's eat first. I've got something to tell you after dinner. Sure, let's eat. I'll take you to the airport after. What time's your flight? He served me a piece of rib. I hadn't had Cameron's cooking in so long, I almost forgot I fell for him after he nursed me when I passed out with a high fever and brought me homemade porridge the next day. That taste, I never forgot. After dinner, Cameron sat up straight, waiting for me to speak. I drank the last sip of soup, put down my bowl, and wiped my mouth. Cameron, actually. His phone rang, interrupting me. He glanced at it. Flora. Sorry, Diana, can you wait a bit? But for the first time, I wanted to stubbornly tell him I'm heading back to LA. Cameron, can you just listen to me for once? Flora's crying came through the phone. Cameron, I dreamed of Dad again. I miss him so much. Do you think he's lonely over there? I want to join him. Listening to Cameron softly comforting her drained my interest. What exactly was I competing with Flora for? She lost her father but still has her mother. Yet as she acts so heartbroken, all Cameron sees is someone needing comfort. Diana. He looked at me guiltily after hanging up, calling my name. I waved it off. Go ahead. He left like a pardoned man, grabbing his coat from the bedroom, placing a kiss on my forehead. "Diana, let's talk when I get back, alright? No more next time, Cameron." I watched him leave, glanced at the messy dining table, grabbed my coat and suitcase to head out. Standing by the door, I returned to the bedroom. Left a note for Cameron. "Cameron, let's end it here. I wish you and Flora happiness." Before boarding, I saw Flora's updated post. A picture of Cameron in an apron, from behind. I liked her post, and she messaged me right after. "Diana, you can't beat my place in Cameron's heart. One word from me and he drops everything for me. What do you have to compete with?" The boarding call came. I laughed, typing up a reply for Flora. "Yeah, that's why I'm stepping aside. Wish you and Cameron a lifetime of happiness. If you tie the knot, send an invite, I'll be sure to bring a gift." Blocked and deleted. There was no need to contact Flora, nor Cameron, anymore. 3 hours later, I landed in LA. Clearing customs, I spotted Blake in a white coat at the front of the crowd. It's been years, yet he hasn't changed much. He handed me a bouquet of lisianthus. "Welcome home. Remember I like lisianthus?" He took my suitcase, slowed his pace for me to keep up. Even amidst the noise, I heard him clearly. "As long as it's about you, I remember." The airport's AC must have been cranked up. My face felt hot. Sitting in Blake's white Range Rover, I had a first real sense of Blake's wealth. Truth be told, Blake and I aren't rich heirs, we just live comfortably. Looks like being a law partner has been good to Blake these past years. "Blake, I've always wanted to ask." I broke the silence, watching the sunset from the overpass. He gave me a nod to continue. "Why'd you agree to such a ridiculous request? Didn't you think I was tricking you?" My grip tightened on the seatbelt. I could almost hear my pounding heart. He turned, looking straight at me, eyes bright. "Thought about it. But even so, I wouldn't give up on that 1% chance. If it's a trick, just let myself be tricked once more. If it's real, then I hit the jackpot." His gaze was gentle, and something inside me started to make sense. "Blake, do you like me?" He laughed softly, pinching my cheek. "Diana, after all these years, you finally figured it out." Learning about Blake's feelings hit me hard. Honestly, I never believed someone as exalted as Blake would lower himself for me. When we were kids, my parents joked about me marrying Blake when I grew up. Back then, I shook my head like a rattle drum. In my opinion, someone like Blake who doesn't seem to care about anything other than studying books should just live a lonely life. His boundaries with women are way too clear, and even with guys, it feels like he's just acquaintances with them. Then I learned a word, asexual. It fits Blake perfectly. But now he tells me he likes me. He can read my face and guess when I'm lost in my thoughts. He messed up my hair. "Diana, haven't you noticed you're the only one who can get within 3 meters of me? Haven't you noticed I'm always thinking about you?" I looked at him, stunned. "Huh? Isn't it because you see me as a sister?" Blake seemed a bit frustrated. "Diana, what kind of decent guy wants to kiss his sister?" That was a bit crude. So crude it made my face blush. He probably noticed my embarrassment and didn't tease me more. He just walked me home. Our houses are pretty close, so it's always the same way home. In the elevator, we stood in silence. I tried not to break it. My eyes wandered but kept glancing back at him. I realized every time I sneaked a peek, he seemed to be watching me too, making my ears burn. When the elevator dinged open, Blake stopped at my door, not intending to go in. He handed me my suitcase. "All right, I won't disturb your family reunion by going in." I nodded, taking the suitcase. He chuckled, messing up my hair again. "Go on, I'll come by with my folks in a couple of days to propose." Those words made my recently settled blush come back. I rolled my eyes at him, took out the keys, and opened the door without another word, but inside, I felt warm. I dragged my luggage inside, the house I hadn't been to in years. An odd feeling of homecoming anxiety hit me. The living room was silent, the suitcase wheels echoed in the empty space, sounding extra loud. Suddenly, I heard hurried footsteps from outside, along with Grandpa's booming voice. He probably thought a stranger broke in. What thief dares to break into my house? Diana? He stopped mid-sentence, seeing me standing there, eyes slightly red. His cane thumped to the ground as his eyes reddened, but he turned to walk away. I dropped my suitcase and rushed over, hugging him just as he approached the bed. Grandpa, I missed you so much. But Grandpa didn't quite believe me. After all, I said I'd be back during breaks when I left for school, but it stretched into years. He knew I'd be back recently, but the exact timing was unclear, only because Blake told him. During those 6 years, I didn't call Grandpa once, so he probably thought I'd forgotten all about him. Grandpa huffed, trying to pull away, but I hugged him tighter, tears falling on his shoulder. Feeling the wetness on his shoulder, he sighed and gave up resisting. He still sounded tough, but his tone softened. You say you missed me, but you didn't come home for 6 years, leaving me alone. If it weren't for Blake remembering all the time, you wouldn't have known when I passed. I quickly covered his mouth, making a spitting sound, eyes disapproving. Grandpa is going to live a long life, and he's not allowed to talk like that. I felt guilty about what he'd said. I'm sorry, Grandpa. It was all my fault. I'm not going anywhere now. I'll stay with you, okay? But Grandpa quickly shook his head. What nonsense are you talking? I'm waiting for you to get married. Only once I see you happy can I leave peacefully to be with Grandma and your parents. Hearing those words, I felt even worse. I knew Grandpa would leave one day, but I hoped it would be much later. After chatting a bit, the atmosphere lightened up. Grandpa looked at me with nostalgia. You've grown up, lost weight, and changed too. No matter how I change, I'll always be his granddaughter. Leaning on his shoulder, I finally felt at peace. Grandpa chuckled softly, then remembered my wedding plans, frowning slightly. Weren't you going to marry before? Why are you suddenly back? I shook my head, not wanting to discuss it. It didn't work out between us, so I called it off. Seeing him about to worry, I remembered what Blake said before leaving. Blushing, I told Grandpa. Blake said he'll come by with his parents to discuss the marriage. Hearing that, Grandpa's eyes widened. He took a moment, then laughed heartily. Well, that boy waited so long, he really got his chance. 2 days later, Blake came by with his parents. Blake's folks were very sincere. Their dowry list filled a whole A4 page. His mother held my hand, smiling warmly. Don't worry, sir. When Diana marries into our family, we won't let her suffer. I promised her mom I'd take good care of her. Blake once again presented his prenuptial agreement, along with several documents of his personal assets. Grandpa, this is what I'm offering Diana. I love her, so I'm giving half of my assets to her. The revised prenuptial agreement was heavily in my favor. Watching Blake and his parents, I finally felt grateful I didn't marry Cameron. Grandpa was really happy about the wedding. He and Blake's parents picked a day, and Blake and I went to get our marriage certificate. In his eyes, that red booklet was the real deal. After Blake posted on social media, I joked about it, took a pic of our marriage certificate, and we snapped a photo together. Our rings were sparkling under the sun. Blake said he planned to give me another ring at the wedding, just something special to wear every day. As soon as I posted the news online, all my friends flooded in with congratulations. That's when they finally believed I was marrying someone other than Cameron. With the certificate sorted, it was all about the wedding photos and the ceremony. I wanted to pitch in, but Blake took care of it all. I just had to try on some dresses and toss in a few decorating tips. I asked Blake why he was handling everything solo. He just hugged me close and played with my fingers one by one, saying, "Because I'm marrying you, it's up to me to get everything ready." Honestly, Cameron did try to get in touch during this time. At first, I just hung up. Later, I changed my number. That put an end to it. The next time I heard anything was just 3 days before the wedding. On the wedding day, Blake and I headed to the hotel early to get dressed and styled. His parents handled the guests while he stuck to me like glue, never leaving my side. In front of the mirror, I noticed Blake staring, eyes full of focus. Curiously, I asked, "Blake, you didn't just start planning all this when I came back, did you?" He gave a little cough and looked away. Even though he didn't say, I had a good guess from that moment. Blake turned back, saw my thoughtful look, and knew I was overthinking. The makeup artist finished my look, praised my skin, and said I barely needed any makeup. She claimed it was the easiest bridal makeup she'd done in years. Blake leaned in and kissed me softly on the lips. I blushed fiercely. Satisfied with my red face, he smirked, "Of course, look whose wife you are." Before he finished, I playfully smacked his head. "Blake. Oh no, honey. You're assaulting your husband." He exaggeratedly held his head like he was in pain. Scared, I hurried to check, but he pulled me in. "Why do you call me Blake like that, honey?" He pretended to pout, making me roll my eyes. The makeup artist chuckled along, reminded us not to mess the makeup, then left us alone. We fooled around until it was almost showtime, and Blake stepped out first. My phone suddenly buzzed then. The screen flashed an unknown number. My first thought was Cameron. I hit decline before my brain caught up. But the number called back persistently. I figured not every unknown caller was him, and I shouldn't block them all because of Cameron. So, I took a deep breath and answered. A voice I didn't recognize asked, "Hello, is this Miss Diana?" I just said yes, keeping my words to a minimum, wanting to know what they had to say. Realizing my hesitance, they quickly got to the point. "This is the ER at Los Angeles Hospital. Your boyfriend Cameron was in a car accident speeding. He's in critical condition. Can you come down to the hospital?" I went blank for a bit, processing. Cameron in LA? And an accident from speeding? "Hello, Ms. Diana, are you still there?" They tried again, snapping me back to reality. I took a deep breath, feeling confused but clear. "Sorry, we broke up. I'm getting married today, no time. Please contact someone else for him." Not waiting for a reply, I hung up. I guessed Cameron might have come to LA because of me, but like I said, we're done. It's not my thing to get involved. Plus, he had plenty of people to lean on, no need for me. The wedding was packed with friends and family, the whole hall buzzing with life. I walked down the aisle in my long gown, holding Grandpa's hand, heading toward Blake. Grandpa always wanted me to find the right person. When the day finally came, I noticed his eyes were watery, like he was moved or something. "Grandpa, why are you crying on such a happy day?" I said that, but seeing Grandpa like that brought a deep ache to my heart too. I tried to smile, to lighten the mood, and remind him that our new home wasn't far. Even after the wedding, I'll visit often. Grandpa noticed my teary eyes as well and patted my hand. All right, let's not cry." The aisle seemed long, but at that moment, it felt like it passed in a flash. As Blake and I held hands tight, Grandpa, by the side, earnestly said, "See Blake, take good care of Diana. Love each other and spend your lives together." His voice quivered again, even though he promised not to cry. Time flies, Grandpa's aged now. I still remember the days when I'd lie on his knees listening to his stories. Now, I've grown up, ready to marry and start a family. Blake nodded seriously, holding my hand tight, his eyes full of warmth and love. "Grandpa, don't worry. I'll take great care of Diana. I won't let you down, or her." With the vows, ring exchange, and kiss witnessed by family and friends, Blake and I officially became husband and wife. "Diana, you're finally my wife." 2 months later, I got an invitation. The groom was Cameron, and the bride's name boldly read Flora. It seems they found their way back to each other after all. Blake came from the study, took the invite from my hand, and frowned at it. "Your ex is getting married?" Seeing his jealous look, I knew he was feeling a bit pouting. I hugged his waist, teasing him. Still jealous? We're on the same registration now, legally married. Cameron is way in the past. Plus, he's happily tying the knot with his true love now. Blake hugged my waist, pausing for a moment. Alright, I'll go with you. I laughed at his grudging demeanor. I wasn't planning to leave you alone in LA. Anyway. Sitting down with Blake, I overheard people gossiping nearby about Flora being 3 months pregnant. Calculating it back, it was while I was still in New York. Their claims of not trying IVF were lies. I snorted, and Blake squeezed my hand. Someone spotted us, smiling and teasing, so I introduced Blake. This is my husband, Blake. I didn't anticipate that car accident left Cameron only able to sit in a wheelchair. I heard his hand was ruined too. For a surgeon, that's worse than death. On stage, Flora asked him if he'd marry her. But Cameron just turned his head, and I felt like he looked at me. Suddenly, I felt nauseous. What's wrong? I'm not sure, feeling a bit sick. Blake, worried, held my hand and rushed me to the hospital for a checkup. So, I didn't hear Cameron ask, Diana, will you marry me? After moving from the ER to OB, the doctor asked about my last period. Only then did Blake and I realize I had been late for over 2 weeks. Has it been late this long before? The doctor's words snapped me out of it. After the college entrance exams, Blake went to Harvard, and I went to New York. To be sure, the doctor scheduled a series of tests. When the confirmation of 4 weeks pregnant came, Blake looked dazed, like he couldn't believe it. I suddenly held his face and kissed him hard, grinning with my eyes nearly squinting shut. Blake, I really am pregnant. Seeing my excitement, his heart swelled with joy and excitement too. He held my hand tight, tears welling up in his eyes. Honey, you're going to be a mom, and I'm going to be a dad. I smiled, holding his hand tight too. Yes, Blake, you're going to be a dad. Leaving the hospital, I got news from an old friend. Cameron and Flora had a huge fight at the wedding, got physical, and both ended up in the hospital. Flora lost the baby, and doctors said she might not have kids again. And Cameron, stabbed by Flora, might not make it. It was saddening. I never expected Cameron and Flora to end up like that. But as the old saying goes, what goes around comes around. I clasped Blake's hand. Blake, I'm hungry. Let's go get some dumplings. Blake laughed, hugging me close. Sure thing, honey.